to call this meeting to order. It's a special meeting, study session for the Atherton Town Council on February 5th, 4 p.m. May I have the roll call, please? And I want to make a statement about someone who is calling in remotely. Councilmember Holland has requested to participate remotely today due to just cause. The just cause is a contagious illness that will prevent her attendance in person. Councilmember Holland, before utilizing the remote participation exemption pursuant to Assembly Bill 2449, can you please confirm that you will be participating through both audio and visual technology, presence of any person over 18 years old in the room and his or her relation?
That's correct.
Vice
Home
Mayor,
alone.
you're all alone? Okay.
Yes.
And you've completed those tasks. So Anthony, will you take the roll?
And Councilmember Holland?
Here.
Yep. Whitmer?
Yes.
I'm here.
And Councilmember Hawkins Manuelian just texted that said she's going to be about 4 minutes late.
Oh,
Be
4
done
minutes
by
late.
then.
I don't think we will be done by then, Councilmember Whitmer, but we will be in process. So, yes, Councilmember DeGoya.
Can I suggest that we take item 2 first? Because Councilmember Hawkins Manuelian, I think, is the only member of the council that has chickens. And I think she should be present for that.
Okay, I have no problem with that. Item number 2, since Councilmember Hawkins Manuelian is going to be late. Is that okay? So item number 2 is consideration of creation of a charter city committee, either ad hoc or standing, and if created, approval of a charter for the committee. Would you like to expound?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Members of the council, at your June 5th study session, you discussed the possibility of pursuing a town charter. Following discussion, you directed that staff return with some recommendations for next steps. And then at the November 20th regular meeting, you discussed some draft charters, a timeline for pursuit of a charter, as well as advantages and disadvantages of obtaining charter city status. And you directed that staff return with a proposed charter for that charter committee, should one be adopted. So that's what tonight's is about. The staff report does include some timeline information as well as some advantages and disadvantages. I won't go into those since we've been into those already. But on page 3 of the staff report, it talks about the discussion of an ad hoc or standing committee. An ad hoc committee would be a subcommittee of the city council working with staff and or consultants, and members of the public would not be involved in discussion or meetings of an ad hoc committee without transitioning that committee to a standing committee. A standing committee is a Brown Act compliant committee with public meetings, which means agendas, minutes, regularly scheduled meetings, et cetera. At a minimum, probably the city manager, city attorney, and city clerk would be involved at the staff level for either committee. If the council desires to move forward with a standing committee, appointments could be made at this meeting, along with direction regarding the committee's charter, which is in italics at the bottom of the staff report. Staff would recommend that the following charter be considered by the council. For the charter of the subcommittee, it's the committee shall work with staff to create a draft charter for the council's future consideration with a target of November 2026 presentation to the electorate. Staff liaisons to the committee shall include the city manager, city attorney, and city clerk. Not all will be at all meetings, of course. If the committee is appointed as a standing committee, work of the committee shall be conducted at regularly noticed public meetings, and committee work shall be reported out to the city council at regular intervals. That concludes the staff report.
Thank you. Back to, well, are there any members of the public who comment on this? Bring it back to council. Do I have any questions for city manager on this item?
Nope.
I have a question. In the direction of the city charter 4 bullet points that you read, are we assuming that that's what we will be going, that's what this ad hoc or standing committee group would decide, that we are going to go out for an election?
That would be council direction,
That we-
but it's included within the charter, so that's their target that the subcommittee is working toward.
And my question is, that would be only if
The council approved.
ad hoc or the standing committee, the
Correct.
public outreach decided that that's the direction we want.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like we did last time.
Here comes Councilman Hawkins Manuel. Diana, just to let you know, we pushed the first item to the second, and we're now covering the charter city.
Yeah, we already
item.
said we weren't gonna have chickens anymore.
Yeah, we didn't want to, we
Specifically
didn't want
my
to talk
chicken.
chicken, we didn't want to talk chickens without you.
Okay.
Okay? All right. So, okay, we have no questions. Back to council for comments at this point.
Actually, I had one question.
Yes. Vice Mayor.
There was in the disadvantages about charter cities, it says there's an expense potentially. Is that mostly just staff time, or is there like, are we gonna have to hire outside counsel or external consultants? or anything?
I'll let
The
the city
expense
manager,
related to it is mostly the election.
election, yeah.
Okay.
Because it would, in order to, if the subcommittee or standing committee, ad hoc committee or standing committee decides that we want to move forward to become a charter city, we have to put it out as a ballot measure. That's expensive. It could be 10,000,
10
25,000.
10 to 20
10 to
usually.
$20,000. And then the staff time also is
Right.
expensive.
And if, just to add to that, if the council ever wished to make amendments to the charter, that would also need to go through the election process each time. Another thing to be mindful of is we would then have to make sure that all town decisions are not just measured to make sure that they're constitutional, that they also comply with our charter, the general plan zoning. So there's one additional layer of consistency that we're going to have to ensure anytime we are advancing a project or making a decision.
Okay. So, any council comments? Yes.
I'm sorry, did you guys already say the background of why we're talking about this? Why this is on?
Yes.
Was there a staff report or
Well,
background
it's
of
just
why?
the report from city manager using the staff report that was discussed and at our last meeting, we talked about forming either a ad hoc committee or a standing. And I want to thank the city manager for clarifying exactly what the difference is between a standing committee, ad hoc committee, because one, and the difference of a standing committee juxtaposed to a town committee, because we have a number of town committees that are standing committees. They are town committees like the EPC, the Park and Rec Committee, that are town authorized committees. And that's a situation where we interview residents to become members of that standing. But we could have a standing committee without public members, but it would open it up to public participation. And a standing committee, that, in my mind, that's the way I think it should go, rather than just having an ad hoc committee of two council people to kind of research this and do pros and cons. Yes, Councilmember.
So I know this is coming up because it came up about a year ago during the consideration of local control versus state control issues, and the issue of home rule being an issue that can be promoted by a charter city, but not by a common law city. So
General.
the concept,
I think it's a general law, not common law.
general law city, but the concept of local control, I think, is an important issue. And we're seeing a lot of increased attempted control by the state legislature. So that seems to me like a good thing to look at. And I think that's why we're looking at this point. And it seems to me that the first thing for us to decide is exactly what you brought up, whether we would want to investigate this through an ad hoc committee or a standing committee. And I agree that it seems to me that the best way to do it would be through a standing committee so that residents could attend those meetings. I don't see a need to create a resident and council committee like we did when we set up the Civic Center Advisory Committee.
Right.
But I do think that it would be valuable to enable residents to attend meetings. And it seems like to do that, we need to have a standing committee. The negative is that it requires staff time, and I don't like to increase the workload on staff, but this is not a permanent committee. It's a temporary committee, and I think it's a worthwhile thing to do.
Appreciate it. Councilmember Whitmer.
Yeah, I'm more in favor of an ad hoc committee, and the reason, but the caveat would be to meet the needs, as you both have brought up, is say that ad hoc committee would have to report out at each formal council meeting what they've accomplished and what their schedule is. And so, keeping everybody informed. The population, general population, should they not want to go to those regular meetings, they will have a chance to look at the charter that's prepared and comment on the charter before we vote on it. And then if we're putting together something to go to the electorate, that'll also be done at a public meeting where we'll come up with the pros and cons and write those things out and agree them before they get published. So I don't think that you're cutting the residents out, but I mean, either would work, but I think the ad hoc committee would work just as well, personally. And I think it might be more convenient for the people who are on it, in case that, for example, one of them can't get there or they need to change the meeting. It's not to do anything in secret, but it's just more convenient because everybody seems to be fairly busy on this council.
Thank you.
I'll comment. I guess I misunderstood because the last time we met on this, I thought what we said was we didn't all totally agree that we wanted to go forward with it. And so where I thought it went is it went back to staff to come back with more education about what the benefit of it is before we even do it. And if that benefit is these points here, that still isn't enough for me to see why we're even talking about it, because it was originally brought up around the housing stuff, but that all went away. So now that that went away, why are we even doing it? And it sounds like a lot of energy for stuff that I don't see a reason for. So in terms of committee, I don't think we should even do it without having the staff tell us a really good reason why we should even take this on, because there's so many other things we could be doing.
Vice Mayor, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I think it should be a standing committee. I think there's a lot of public interest in this discussion. And I think having it be, give people a chance to come and do public comment in these meetings would be valuable, even though it does take more staff time. And I don't know that a charter city is the right call for us, but I think this process should be very, very public. So I would be in favor of standing.
Okay, so my feelings are that what we have on our agenda tonight, staff did put together some advantages and disadvantages of what a charter city is. There's a lot more depth that can be gleaned from some of these bullet points. And I think that's the purpose of a standing committee, short-term, that would be publicly noticed meetings, so any member of the public could come and listen and participate as giving feedback. And then the standing committee would then work with staff with the findings to then bring back to council to decide whether or not we want to create a draft charter to put out to the residents for a vote. That's how I see it. I think that on page 16 of 29, direct the charter of the committee as follows, that the committee is going to work with staff. I think it's a little cart before the horse, this summary of what the committee's chore is. I think what the committee's charter should be, a standing committee, to research current charter city laws and regulations to see what could be a benefit for the town. What are the pitfalls? I mean, my brief survey of everything is that a charter city is typically a much larger city than this, okay? Because they get more benefits. But I don't know. And we've gone through this in 2015, I think, the exercise, but it's 10 years ago. Let's do it again. So I think, so with that being said, I'd like to, I guess, call for volunteers, or else I have a couple of people in mind that I'd like to appoint to be part of this standing committee to then take the reins and do the research, schedule public meetings, and talk about it, and do the research and bring back a report to the council. That sound reasonable? Anybody?
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Be interested
So
in-
what I'm going to do is I'd like to have our vice mayor part of the committee, and I'd like to ask Councilmember DeGoya like to be on that standing vice mayor.
Sure.
Do you do that?
I mean, Councilmember Whitmer volunteered. I'm happy for him to be on it, but I'm
I think Councilmember
work-
Whitmer and
working-
I were on the previous one, so I'd like to get
working
some
with the
fresh
vice
eyes.
mayor on a
Last one
on a committee
was
would be
Derek.
enjoyable for me. So,
How about you? Okay,
Sure. I mean, if I don't, I'm happy to do it, but if Bill really wants to be on it, that's fine by me too. So I have not been on a committee with Rick yet, though, so this could get exciting.
well, oh gosh.
I don't think this committee is going to be a lot of work.
Mm-mm.
I appreciate that. I think that the two of you will make a very good team and will be efficient and be able. Obviously, we've got public interest. Had a letter from the public about this already, and it's a little confusion because it is confusing about an ad hoc committee, standing committee and stuff, and I think that we've clarified that. Okay,
So do we need a motion?
You'll need a motion and a roll call vote to amend the charter, to amend the first bullet point to research the current charter city laws and benefits as well as pitfalls instead of that first bullet. And then
you
confirm
want
the
to say that again
volunteers.
because you kind of mumbled into your beard.
Oh, sorry. Research current charter city laws and benefits as well as pitfalls.
Okay, I like that.
And then eliminate the first bullet point and then approve the two appointees.
Wait, I'm sorry. Which are the bullets we're looking
Well,
at?
see, on page 16 of
Yeah,
your
I see
29,
16.
see the italicized thing?
I
the
see the
four lo-
bullets
yeah.
under forming a charter or standing committee. Charter, direct the charter of the committee as follows. Is that what you're addressing?
Yes, right, these 4 bullet points. And so he modified first one
Okay.
to read,
Research current city charter city laws and benefits as well as pitfalls.
doesn't that seem what we wanted to
Yeah.
do?
Yeah.
And not go straight to creating a draft charter,
Right.
because that's after we decide, that's,
That's fine.
okay,
That'll just require an additional meeting.
yeah. So are you I'm making the motion. So I've made the motion.
I'll
Can I
second it.
get a second? All those in favor?
We need roll call.
Sorry, guys.
Councilmember Holland,
Yeah.
Councilmember Hawkins,
Yes.
Councilmember DeGolia,
Yes.
Councilmember Whitmer.
Yes.
And
Yes, thank, okay.
So the first meeting, just to be clear, will be, staff will work with Vice Mayor Holland and myself to figure out a convenient time, and then we'll notify the public.
Correct.
Are we allowed to meet outside of public settings? I'm just thinking Rick and I might want to meet to like establish a flow of meeting order before we start inviting the public to
No,
the.
you're a standing committee, so you can't even communicate via email.
Hmm.
Create it, you know,
Wait,
That's your first meeting.
to first meeting.
So we'll
Your
have a
first
meeting.
will be formed.
Talk
to
about our
form
meetings.
her- Yeah,
that's fine.
Have fun.
Awesome.
it'll be fun.
Let Anthony know when you're gonna have your first meeting.
Okay. All right, let's go back to item number 1. And item number 1 is adoption of an urgency ordinance and introduction and first reading of an ordinance amending the Atherton Municipal Code, Chapter 6.04, related to the regulation of chickens. Now, why are we having an urgency meeting about this, an urgency ordinance? Well, I think.
The price of eggs.
Well, yes, and it somehow it slipped through the cracks that we didn't get the law on the books, and we've been operating without an ordinance having to regulate chickens. And speaking of something about chickens, the county of, I just want to pass this around. The county of San Mateo sends out a weekly sheet of information. In last week, they talk about bird flu. Okay, and this is the little blurb on bird flu. And Stacy, I've got one for you, but you don't have to read it now. But it's it's something that's we really need to be aware of here in our community, and especially if we're going to have chickens running around. But anyway, so let's see.
Would you like a brief staff report, Mayor Lewis?
Yes, please. You're going to do that, Mona?
I will be doing the brief staff report. The item before you is consideration, as the mayor have said, of two things, two actions. Adoption of an urgency ordinance today, which will necessitate a 4/5 vote, and the purpose of which will be to immediately upon adoption enact, or I should say reenact, regulations related to the keeping of chickens. The first reading and introduction will be followed by second reading and adoption. The reason why we are requesting consideration of the urgency ordinance and a regular ordinance is that for me, it's standard practice, but in the event someone challenges the findings associated with an urgency ordinance, the traditional ordinance is adopted and serves to protect the city. By way of background, though, as of 2016, the town had considered regulating the keeping of chickens and decided to adopt an ordinance that allowed but regulated such use. That was adopted in Chapter 6.04 of the town's municipal code. In 2023, the town collaborated with the County of San Mateo along with other jurisdictions to facilitate the county's delegation to assist with animal keeping as a whole. As part of that process, unfortunately, the entirety of Chapter 6.04 was repealed and reenacted. The provision with respect to chickens was inadvertently omitted at that time. We did receive a resident request about chickens recently, and that's when the omission was discovered. So today you are simply being requested to reenact what the town had for almost a decade with respect to chickens. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Any member of the public have a question? Seeing none? Council have a question for Mona about this. Seeing none? go on to comments. So Mona, just reinstating our chicken ordinance from 2016, has anything changed in the town that would about needing change in the ordinance?
No.
Not that I'm aware of.
Councilmember Widmer.
So I spoke to George about this in our one-on-one. There's very few people that actually got a license. I think people really don't know what they need to do. And the people that I do know that do have chickens aren't following the setback requirements and things like that. They push the chickens, which is what I brought up when we first looked at that, to the back of their property. And so not all people, but most people. And those chickens become actually their neighbor's chickens, so to speak. So I think it would be worthwhile for us to put something in the Athertonian to at least alert people about this so that they become more knowledgeable. Because I believe that there's probably, you can count on one hand the number of licenses that we have. And I think there's a lot more. Yeah, we have two, right? One was my neighbor who I told her to look at the ordinance when she wanted to get chickens, and somebody else recently. So really, everybody else is like you are illegal. So I'm going to report her. Go check her out. Okay. But anyway, so I do think we should put something in the Athertonian so people become aware, and then they can at least register and know what the deal is. Because if they're making too much noise or somebody says something, then they're going to have, well, we
Okay.
didn't know anything about it.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilmember Hawkins Mamala.
I'd like to give a little historic context to how we got here.
Yeah.
In 2016, prior to that, the rules for chickens were based on a long, long time ago when everybody had big acre farms. And in the meantime, it became like a pastime. People were growing chickens and a lot of people had chickens. So in 2016, we had a public meeting where the room was full of people because there were way more people than we realized had chickens. And their issue was, we can't have chickens because we don't have acres and acres. So this rule was to make it so the people with a normal sized lot could still have chickens. So that was what was put in place in 2016. So, and we do reach out. You're right that a lot of people, most people don't know the rules. You're absolutely, in fact, I don't even know them and I should. But we do at Earth Day, just so everyone knows, we put up a sign and we tell people what our current rules are. And we do public outreach on it at Earth Day. So we have the local chicken guy that most of us use for our feed, brings live chickens and he has the sign in front of the chickens. So we do some amount of reach out, but I think you're right. We should let people know the rules because, we forget.
So if we only have 2 residents who have permits and there are a lot of people.
The room was filled.
Okay, so how can we incentivize these people to get permits so that we can bring everybody in compliance without somehow penalizing them or, fining them? Because I'm sure that there are fines associated with not having a permit that's required by the town of Atherton to do something.
Well, I think if you just put it in the Athertonian, you're going to get a lot of people. I think people do read the Athertonian. At least half the people that get it read it.
But I think that
someone
all of a sudden
remind us?
they're just going to say, oh, gosh, I got to go down there and get my chicken permit. They're not going to do that.
Why-
Even though that it's in the Athertonian, that's not an incentive. You either do a carrot
Why do we?
or you do a
Why
stick.
do we care is the question. Why do
Well,
we care?
that's a question.
Can I ask a question? Is it really just 2 people have pulled a chicken permit? Or is that just our bill estimate?
No, it's true.
2?
2.
Wow.
2, do you have one?
I don't have chickens. So,
Oh, all right.
oh,
What can someone remind us
What
what
the
it is
penalty?
actually, why are we doing it? And is there a penalty? I don't
Well, there
remember
should be.
this.
Oh,
Obviously,
I'm sure
there,
there's a penalty.
yeah, of course. there's a
Why
penalty.
are we
But
doing?
people, like with everything else in Atherton, there's only a possible penalty if someone complains.
Right.
That's true.
So someone's only going to complain if they're annoyed by their neighbor's chickens, which we've heard that has happened on rare occasions. And obviously, it hasn't motivated a lot of people to secure a permit.
Maybe we should review what the rules are, because I remember that we changed the rules on the number you could keep so that but that was because in response to
Well,
residents. And
I
number
think-
two,
All the
We've
rules are
had,
in the back.
So
the back.
I actually had a question
Yes,
for
you
the
didn't
council, which
check it
is,
out.
I didn't.
I had a question for the council, which is to confirm or change the numbers that we had in the ordinance. And those numbers are, there's basically no chickens allowed on less than a half an acre.
Yeah.
3 chickens are allowed on a half an acre up to an acre. 10 chickens are allowed on an acre up to 2 acres. 20 chickens are allowed on more than 80,000 square feet, which is approximately 2 acres. And I don't have chickens, so I don't have any judgment on this, but if a council member has chickens, maybe she could comment on whether, do 3 chickens make sense on a half an acre? I mean, would you go to the trouble of building a chicken coop for 3 chickens?
Maybe it depends how big your family is. When they're really young, ours are all old, so we're getting hardly any eggs now. You usually want to have enough chickens that you can produce eggs for your family, right? So that wouldn't be very many, because they produce, when they're in their peak, they'll produce 1 egg a day. So at minimum, you'd want 1 for every person, but there are seasons where they don't lay, which right now we have hardly any eggs. So yes, the answer is that's not very many. And most people have an acre, so that's why that number 10 kind of landed where, that's about the number people would want, between 6 and 10. And you buy them in lots. And in fact, you buy them on the internet now, and they come in a little box with little peepee guys, and there's X number that you can buy. So you can't say, I want 3, unless you're going to go to Half Moon Bay and buy 3, but they come in a box. That box, I think, is 6, increments of 6. So yeah. And we do on the noise stuff, which was probably the biggest valid argument against chickens. We don't allow,
No rooster.
yeah. And that really goes a long way on the sound part.
We can go up to 4 for
So
half an acre.
Maybe we should make the minimum 6. I mean, I think as a council, I think there's no reason not to encourage people to have chickens. The only reason to discourage it is if they're bothering their neighbors. And that's the reason that it makes sense to me that we encourage people to get a permit. And if they don't have a permit and they get complained about, then code enforcement is going to make sure they either get a permit or get rid of the chickens.
So.
I'm going to interject because I haven't had a chance to speak, right? Chickens are adorable. Little baby chickens are ultra adorable. And when they're in their laying, seasons, they make eggs and they're lovely, but they're also messy. They are very messy and can create unpleasant environments if the owners are not cleaning up after them all the time and keeping it sanitary. And then they tend to roam. I mean, they scoot under the fence and disappear. So, unless you have a really well-built environment for them, and hope that our residents would do that, there's a lot of, I think, leakage, and that bothersome. Yes,
So,
Bill.
So chickens also make noise when they're laying eggs and things like that, or they see another bird come by that, or a dog or whatever, they do a lot of squawking, but I'm not complaining about the noise. However, I think we should look at what some of the other towns are doing. I believe Palo Alto, I think the number is 4, and they have smaller lots than half acre. And they have four.
They're
I
mostly
believe it's
5,000
four
square
in
feet.
that, in there, because I go by a lot of their houses, the small houses, and they've got four, and many of them have them in the front yard too. But that's neither here nor there. They're cute to look at, but I think we should do a survey of what the other towns do before we decide, because the former mayor said that they come in a box of 6. I don't know.
Can I interject
Yeah,
here?
yeah.
So when the council adopted this in 2016, it came after several meetings of research by the planning commission where they did look at alternatives from other communities. They provided their best recommendation. The council adopted it in February or so of 2016. You set these standards. You had a huge discussion at the council level by a former council member who didn't keep chickens, but had a lot of opinions about chickens. So we can go back and do all of that again if you want, but I don't think chicken laws change all that frequently in communities because they're pretty hot
So-
topic.
It's my recommendation that we just adopt the urgency ordinance for tonight, get it back on the books. And if there's outcry or something, I really think that we need to have more participation from the residents who own chickens to be considerate enough to come and register that they have chickens and get a permit. I don't know, how much does the permit cost? $2?
I can't remember what it costs,
Like
but,
$1 a chicken or something
but
like that.
it's rare that we get chicken complaints. I don't think you get that many
If I can interject.
with a
the-
microphone. Yeah.
Here's
Most people don't
Kinda loud.
complain about their
This
neighbors.
is Lisa Marie, code enforcement.
Lisa Marie Daly, Code Enforcement Officer. Of the complaints that we get, they're majorly roosters. And we have abated those and they've been voluntarily abated. Chickens aren't the type of bird that you can just flip up their skirt and say, okay, you're a boy or you're a girl. When they become teeny boppers, then that usually happens. I grew up on a ranch, so I know these things. So usually when you get your lot of 6, sometimes you may end up with a boy and you're not going to know that until they maturity, at which point the neighbors will call and complain, and usually that's what happens. As far as enforcement on this, I would caution that we can't look in backyards to see where these are. So we are reliant for chicken complaints upon the complaints from the neighbors. Everything will be reactive because the ordinance states that those pens, the enclosure can be up to 120 square foot. And it has to have a pen or the pen has to have an enclosure of some sort inside to protect them from the elements and so on and so forth. So assuming you have that 8 foot from the building, 20 foot from the fence line, we would have no way to know unless a neighbor called. If all of the neighbors have chickens and they don't care about the neighbors around them, they don't have an incentive to call or to report those things.
Right.
And I don't know what the new fee schedule says as far as these types of permits. I'd have to go back and look, but this was back 2016 that we had our last ones issued. I don't think that they're per bird necessarily anymore. I'm not sure how that works, but that would be my only recommendation. I don't know how to incentivize people other than educating them. We can definitely educate them through the Athertonian. My only concern would be there is no incentive for them to go spend money to report this. It's kind of like the AD that we're fighting with. How do we incentivize people to bring that? The chickens, there really is none unless you bribe them for eggs. I don't have any other suggestions for that. But really the roosters, we get complaints for those occasionally, and it's usually when new chickens are brought in and then they reach maturity and then they call and say, hey, same person, same problem, get rid of it. And they're gone very quickly. They know they're ready to go. The other part on this ordinance that I did want to bring up is I don't see anything in there about other types of fowl. And I believe there was a section there before about peacocks, geese, ducks, and other fowl and poultry. That is not being adopted either. And I think that that section might have been left out, but I don't have the original copy with me.
No, we didn't talk about it.
So that's another thing. We have had complaints about peacocks and ducks and geese, and we have enforced on those as well prior to this last year when it was omitted. So those are like roosters for the same thing.
Are they illegal? They're illegal. They're
No,
not
they're
supposed to
not.
be
They were.
peacocks.
If they're not listed, that
Right.
what you
Right.
can have, then they're illegal.
Yeah.
Can't have, right?
Yeah, they were listed as illegal, but I don't know what section they were. This, I think, is under 45.45, but that would be the only to add to it.
Can I ask are there any other animals that you have to have a permit for? Are chickens the only animals in town that you have to have a permit for?
Yes, there was an ordinance portion of this for rabbits, but we don't, and homing pigeons, but we don't have that anymore. They're not permittable at that point. San Mateo County runs the permits for dogs. So you have to register any dogs that are violent or vicious or have that characterization that they've determined that by the county. You have to register with the county themselves. Dog licenses, I don't think. Or dog license.
No, they're the county.
Yeah, I don't think
The
everything for
county
that
does
goes through the
dog
county.
licenses, but we have an ordinance that says you can have up to 3.
Okay.
So the chicken ordinance that's the only animal that we get a permit for. And it can't be like what he was saying per chicken because they die and then you get a new one. They're
I thought it
broods.
was
They're not,
3.
they're not like your
Okay.
one dog.
I
You
think
have
this-
groups, yeah.
Spirit of the ordinance is because you have to have an enclosure. The requirement of
So
the
it's saying,
ordinance
"Hey,
is
I
an
have one."
enclosure. To say, do I meet the setback requirements? Just like if you put an accessory structure on your property, you put a shed or anything else there, you may not need a building permit for that 120 square foot structure, but you still need planning's approval, which is why you get this permit through planning. So if you need the approval for the zoning portion of this, planning needs to know that you have a structure there and that it meets the 8-foot requirement from the structure, from your main house. It's in the buildable area. There's 4 or 5 different things that you have to meet those requirements for. So I believe that the intention of this is to keep them from going under the fence, going into the neighbor's yard, running around in the front yard or anywhere else. It's not necessarily, we want to know how many chickens you have. It's, are they in a safe and locatable area that is not going to be detrimental to neighbors? Are they going to be a health hazard? Are they going to be noisy? Is this far enough away? Did they butt it up against the back fence?
So when I go to get my permit, do I sign anything that says I'm providing adequate facilities? Am I signing something or am I giving myself to be inspected by signing? Or what, how's that work?
Both.
Somebody can come out and
So
check
who
you
on
out.
earth why would anyone want to do that?
That's what I'm saying, is because planning would probably need a design, correct me if I'm wrong, George, because I'm not the
They'll need a
approval.
little site plan, but it can be hand drawn just for verification and staff will come out and say, yes, this is within the buildable area and yes, it's 120 square feet.
And that's just for verification. And if you're a good citizen, you go ahead and make sure that you're doing everything you need to do in compliance. And that makes you puts you on the books to show that you do have a valid permit. It's valid for however long life, as long as you have the structure and then you're good to go. And then if somebody complains about you, you can say, oh, no, I have this. And that way, if a new neighbor moves in next to you and decides they don't like it and they want to complain about it, you have a valid permit. If you don't, then you have to go jump through these hoops and get one retroactively and say, oh yeah.
So it's actually, they actually inspect your yard when you do the permit?
I believe so.
Are you able to inspect if someone gives you a sound ordinance? Like if someone had the rooster and it was making noise and you're able to go on property, can you inspect at the time that they're doing something at fault?
I've never had to go onto the property for that. Usually I can hear it from the side of the street and I say, you guys have a rooster? Yeah, we're getting rid of it this afternoon. It's already in the box, ready to go. And usually,
Yeah.
because they know, they
Yeah.
already know.
Is there any other way that you can, where I'm trying to go with this is instead of making everyone get a permit, which nobody's going to do, if the goal is to be able to inspect that they're actually following up with like the safety and the health things, is there any other way we can inspect when they're doing something wrong, which seems to be the way we do everything here? There's a word for it. If someone complains,
Complaint-based.
complaint based. So is there a way to enforce this that's complaint based?
But the question then is, what are you enforcing? You have to have a regulation requirement in order to actually enforce the requirement. So if we don't have a chicken permit or a chicken enclosure requirement or any of those other things,
Well, there's a difference between having the enclosure and having a permit.
Yes.
You can set requirements for your enclosure.
Okay, city
Well,
attorney must say something.
We can still regulate chickens without requiring a permit. We could also state that the only way you can keep chickens on your property is by following the regulations set forth in here. You know, failure to do that will result in nuisance abatement and code enforcement. Typically, nuisance abatement is, our noise ordinance and so on and so forth, but we would probably need to add another provision that essentially, since if we're not going to be issuing a permit, we can't then revoke your privilege to do that. So we would have to affirmatively say something in the ordinance along the lines of, you are prohibited from having chickens for a year or for however long as kind of the penalty.
But
I
in
think
answer-
Councilmember DeGoya has something to say.
Well, I don't want to interrupt.
The
the
train of
back and
thought here.
forth.
I think
Well, I think that it's important that the terms of this ordinance are convenient for our residents. And if, when you buy chickens, which I'm sure buying them by mail is probably the way people get them, if the minimum they get is 6, I think that it makes no sense for us to say up to 3 are permitted on a half an acre. We should say up to 6. If I want to get chickens and I look at the ordinance that says up to 3 and I can only buy 6, I'm not going to file any kind of a permit. I'll just get my 6 chickens. So we should make it convenient. So I would make a motion that we approve this as suggested with the change of the numbers for 6 as the initial number for the 20 to 40,000 square feet and 12 for the other. I think once you go beyond 12, it doesn't matter because it's probably babies that are creating new chickens and, but I just want to make it convenient for residents. That's all I'm saying.
So before there's a second on that, what I'd echo or what I would suggest is you adopt the urgency ordinance as it is and then make the change on introduction of the new ordinance for second reading in February. Because the urgency ordinance gets it on the books. You can't change that one. So adopt it with changes on the introduction of the second ordinance, which will be
That's fine,
effective
but
in
well,
2
what's it
weeks.
matter? I mean,
Oh, well, Mona,
So the significance here is if the council approves the urgency ordinance today, then code enforcement can ensure compliance tomorrow. It becomes effective immediately. But if you wish to make changes to the urgency ordinance, then we're going to have to bring it back at the next meeting, and it will not be effective until it's revised and adopted.
okay, that's fine.
6.
And just as a point of clarification, Councilmember DeGolia, so your motion will change it so that B1 will now say up to 6 chickens are permitted on the half acre up to 1 acre, and then up to 12 chickens are permitted on lots greater than an acre up to 2 acres. And then are the balance of the numbers to remain? So up to 20
Yeah,
chickens
the
and 40?
rest of the numbers are fine. I think.
Okay. Understood.
I'm just
Thank you.
trying to make it convenient for residents.
And and I just want to kind of push back a little bit on the convenience, because, and I'm sure Diana is correct, that if you buy little chicks through the mail, that you're going to get more than 3. You may get 4. It depends on who you buy through. I mean, or you can go to Half Moon Bay and pick your little chickens out yourself, your 3. And that's not like a bridge too far. It's not like you have to go across country to do that, to get your 3. So if you're in a smaller lot, 6 chickens can be a lot, I think. But
No,
that's
if they
just,
can buy less, they can buy less. I'm just trying to make it convenient.
Well,
but convenience, I mean, is it's very subjective.
No, it's what you get in the mail because people aren't going to Half Moon Bay
well,
Why not?
because.
You do, you go but there and buy
No, I
plants.
have never done that.
so I just looked at buying chickens online. There's this Valley, the first one came up, Valley Hatchery Poultry, and it says 3 chickens minimum.
Okay.
Just so you know,
Okay.
a little bit how this works, you also get them sexed, you were talking about. So you pay extra to get them sexed, which anyone in Atherton has to do. And even when you do that, they come back. So, and when you buy the 6, I've not seen them for less than 6. But if you get them for 6, there's often more than 6 in the box.
Just looked it up.
But it depends on what kind of chickens they are too. There's a
They're
whole thing to
egg-laying
it.
chickens,
But
high
they're not all the
quality.
same. There's different breeds. Anyway,
Well, of
not want
course,
to get
but
into all that, but
Well, we could just pass the emergency.
That's just.
let's just
ordinance.
pass the thing.
Questions?
Yeah.
Sorry, guys, you're really flowing and I'm
Yes, Vice Mayor.
jump in. I have a code enforcement question. When someone gets a call saying there's a rooster in my neighbor's house, are we checking to see if they have a chicken permit or doing any education in that moment when we know they have chickens to make sure they're on our list? Is my first question. If there's any mechanism for that, since that feels like the lowest hanging fruit. On that front.
Did you have a second part of that?
I had another question that's not as code enforcement related or a comment. I'm wondering, I think the most important thing is the health safety component of owning chickens. We should know who has chickens so we can tell them about stuff like the bird flu. And I'm wondering if there's any, like, if you have chickens, is there anyone, are you on a list somewhere of getting information on how to safely keep your chickens to prevent like disease spread and that kind of stuff? Like I feel like the permit is more valuable to me to have contact info of chicken owners
Minimum,
than anything to me.
it's not 6.
To answer the first question, again, Lisa Marie Daly, Code Enforcement. When I do approach somebody with a rooster complaint, though I'm not out there for the chicken complaint, we do educate on site and let them know. I asked, do you have other chickens? And they usually say, yes, I do. And I say, you have an enclosure? And usually they say, yes, I do. I say, good, because that's required. What the enclosure is, we don't go into details at that point. Usually I'll tell them, here's the ordinance to reference, chapter 6.04. Please contact planning and let them know have this, and they can give you information specific to how to get this. Because I can't enter their property without permission, and because I don't have that actual complaint, I'm not going to go onto the property necessarily and invade their space to do that, because I'm out there for one reason, even though I've given them that education. It is up to them to follow those rules as the property owner. It's a fine line between that, because I've seen so many complaints that are out there on a regular basis that we try to, if it's a health and safety issue, then obviously forward. If this becomes a health and safety issue, that we follow up on, but if it's just got chickens and complained about that, just the rooster, if they wanted to complain about the chickens, they would have said something about the chickens. I mean,
Sounds like you're doing a good job on it.
we're trying to,
Yes,
of the
exactly.
education, but we can't control
within your
everybody.
limitations. Respecting its privacy. Yeah,
We don't want to
Right.
be heavy-handed with chickens.
no way, no.
They're friendly.
Yeah, people who have chickens are typically,
And one of our repeat offenders, just to let you know that we get rooster calls all the time because they always rooster. The person who calls in on them also has chickens.
Hmm.
And their neighbors, and he says, yeah, they ended up with the rooster this time, and it's really hard to enforce on that one house and then go back to your reporting party and say, hey, by the way, tell me that your chickens are quiet and now they've got this rooster, but now I have to enforce on you both. And then they get mad at me and I'm not. And then it explodes. And now I have 40 places that are getting calls for chickens, and we just don't have time and the caseload for that when there's other bigger issues, unless that's at the council's pleasure and that's what they want us to spend our time doing. And we'd be happy to do so,
I heard
but we
chicken
have to
patrol.
prioritize.
Chicken patrol. All right, thank you. All right, so I'd like to bring it back and let's at least call for a motion to adopt the urgency ordinance as written, as stated, and it's fun.
I'd like to move that we adopt the emergency ordinance as written.
Thank you. Okay, that's a motion. Any second?
I'll second it.
There you go, Vice Mayor. Any questions? All in, roll call, please.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, okay. So we have the urgency ordinance codified.
Okay.
Now, going forward, there seems to be, there was a motion for that we make a change to the numbers of chickens for the convenience of our.
Yeah, but that was based on some information, and Councilmember Whitmer seems to have corrected that information. So I think if chicken owners want to increase the number, they should let us know.
So going forward,
Just a motion to introduce the ordinance for
we're
first
going to
reading.
make a motion to introduce the ordinance as written. Binders here for the first reading, and it'll come back to us for a second reading.
I second that.
I guess I moved. I made the
I assume
motion.
that you were.
Yes, okay. Councilmember Whitmer seconded. Questions?
I thought that's what we just approved.
That was the urgency.
I see.
This is the first reading
Yeah.
of the new ordinance going forward.
Which is identical. It's just a belt and suspenders approach.
It's okay.
To do.
Hmm.
Roll call, please.
Holland,
Yes.
Hawkins,
Yes.
Whitmer.
Yes.
Fulia.
Yep.
Yes. Okay, motion passes.
Now we
So we
got-
have chickens and we have the first reading. See this one more time for a second reading down the road.
Can't wait.
So item number, thank you, Lisa. Item number 3 is just to receive and file our mid-year budget report for fiscal year 2024-25. And I think that's our finance. Third,
Yes. Thank you, Mayor, council, members of the public. Yes, before you is the receive and file of the mid-year budget report for fiscal year 24-25. In the staff report was illustrated that our mid-year 24-25 budget reports a projected total revenue of 26.3 million. Revenues are expected to exceed projections for fiscal year by 817,000. This is increased from the adopted budget of 25.5 million. This is primarily due to increases in our property taxes, ERAF, and some charges for services and other revenues. For fiscal year 24-25, our expenditures are projected at 21.2 million. This is an increase of 183,900. And it's primarily due to one-time expenditures for operations and maintenance. In summary, on the staff report, mid-year is showing a net positive change increase. This is revenues over expenditures of 633,000. This resulted in a 634,000 resulted in a projected year-end fund balance of 12.4 million. And this is inclusive of our reserves. On page 2, I'll go over some highlights in page 2 of the staff report. The total property tax revenue is at 15.8 million during budget. The increase in revenue is to 279,000 to 16.8 million for our property taxes. And also within the staff report, I listed just a discussion about our VLF in lieu that we anticipated the state's shortfall in 24-25 budget. This budget included 1.4 million. And within this was included the backfill of our 22-23 shortfall amount of 424,000 that we received in August, and also includes our 1,008,527 for 24-25. Wanted to highlight there's still a shortfall of a total of 1.455 million. And this is made up of two shortfalls, 23-24 shortfall of 704,000 and a fiscal year 24-25 shortfall of 750,000. These shortfalls are repeatedly presented to the state through our county's consortium and through our also our legal consultant to the state to include them in our upcoming state budget. So those are continuing counties and cities are continuing to request these shortfalls in the state budget. The fiscal year 24-25 ERAF budget, however, we had budgeted 2.5 million and the ERAF received this year is 2.71 million. So that's an increase of 271,000
Say that.
for ERAF. So we have a
Yeah.
VLF
I think
issue
it-
and we have a positive ERAF excess issue. So that's just the state, pay Peter to rob Peter to pay Paul kind of deal. So just wanted to highlight in 23-24, our ERAF was 2.6 million to 2,663,000. And so we received 2,771,000. As you recall, during our budget discussions, we have increased ERAF budget to 2.5 million. We'll revisit this again during our budget discussions for the 25-26 fiscal year budget. So you can see ERAF is going up. Um, Other revenues that kind of, I'll highlight some of them. Planning revenue shows a decrease of 300,000 at mid-year. And this is indicative of a slowdown in applications for future construction permits. However, building revenue reflects an increase of about approximately 150,000 for a total of 2.3 million. There is an increase in miscellaneous revenue of 163,000. This is mainly due to us receiving our Caltrain Peninsula Corridor electrification project money. This, as the council may recall, this is a mitigation money for the electrification project for the Caltrain. So we received those funds, and these are one-time revenues that the town will receive. All other revenues remain static, as mentioned in the staff report. So at mid-year, as we mentioned earlier in the summary, there's an additional 183,000 in expenditure appropriations. On page 3 of the staff report, it lists the different requests and expenditures. Building department, due to revenue adjustments, is an expenditure increase of 76,000. Administration, there's an additional increase of 25,000 expenditures due to a Laserfish phase 2 project that we're undertaking right now. This is our document imaging implementation project. Police department, there's a 53,000 expenditure increase, and this is due to overtime backfill and training, and also includes additional appropriations for an alarm monitoring system upgrade that we're undertaking this year. And the Public Works Department has an increase of about 30,000, and this mainly is due to, as the council is aware, we do not have a park service event manager. And so we previously engaged a part-time and temporary employee to assist manage events at the park. In the first half of this year, the arrangement was not suitable due to our requirement of 15 to 20 hours a week. We're looking to revisit that again, having a part-time temporary employee to manage the park. So this is a one-time cost requirement of 30,000 for the remainder of the budget year. And page 4 of the staff report just summarizes our revenues and expenditures, positive increase of 634,000 to a net. This is a net positive 5.1 million change in fiscal year fund balance. And we project a fiscal year 24-25 year-end fund balance of 12.4 million. This includes the 860,000 for our CLP debt, all our mid-year adjustments, and also the transfer out of 4.4 million towards our capital project fund. This concludes my staff report. Staff wants to also remind the council that this budget resolution will be included at our February 19 council meeting for these adjustments on the consent agenda.
And 2 things to point out. One is in the PD's adjustments, the bulk of that increase is the 40,000 for the upgrade to the alarm monitoring system, which I think the community has been clamoring for to transition from landlines to an IP system. So the PD's going to be working on that. And Robert mentioned ERAF and a number of other agencies out there, because ERAF continues to creep up. And we keep talking about the state making it a target. It just hasn't really affected it yet.
Yeah.
We think it will. But there are agencies out there that are transitioning their ERAF to be above the line and using some or all of it for operations. We are not recommending we do that. We are recommending we keep it below the line and use it for one-time or long-term debt.
Continues to exceed expectations. Sir, any other questions? Any questions?
Nope. Good job, Robert.
Questions? Comments on it? Well, ERAF, when I first got on council, $900,000.
Right.
2.5.
It's growing.
No more.
Well, now it's 2.7, but we budget at
2.7.
2.5 because of the notion of we don't know when it will decrease. And several years ago, I think it did decrease one year. I want to say probably in fiscal year 15, 16, it had gone down a couple 100,000. But we were always hitting that 2.2 million, 2.1.
So Robert, the HDL
Mhm.
is projecting the reduced property tax revenue.
Or a slowdown.
4.5.
A
Slowdown.
slowdown, correct. In years past, they've anticipated us to project, increases between 4.5% to 5.5%. They just because of the way the economy is right now, and then just the way they're seeing on the building of new homes and the selling of existing homes, they see a kind of a slowdown, to say. So they currently project CPI would be 2%, and then about 1.5% would be the transfer of ownership. That's where, the selling of new homes. So they're estimated about 3.5%, for this next coming year. But also we add in another 1% for increases in homes construction and those hitting the market. So I still feel confident that if we continue to budget between 4.5% a year in property taxes, we should be increases.
But,
We should
but
be
you
okay.
can see on page 2, the revenue projection for planning permits,
Yes.
which is the precursor to a building permit, it's going down. So,
Yeah, significantly.
right. And so in here, you need a planning permit before you can get your building permit. So we're going to see a slowdown at some point.
That's a big number.
Yeah. And that's usually 2 to 3 years in advance of the building permit process.
Comments from Vice Mayor? Any questions?
No,
Councilmember?
I just am very proud of myself that I was able to read this entire document 3 years into being on council, and I understood all of it. So
Oh, you're such a bright
Simple
spot.
one.
You are
It only
such a.
took-
Come on.
it took me a few
Simple
years
one.
of being like, George, what is that? What's this one? What is that? So
He's such a good instructor.
Mhm.
Okay, so this is a receive and file. We don't need a
Mm,
motion to.
Correct.
Guess what?
Okay, moving on to item number 4,
That will get done in 15
which is,
minutes.
oh boy, my favorite.
I'm glad.
Yes.
Two bullets that
Item
we
number
need to
4
talk-
is to give direction and feedback regarding the traffic studies, numerous traffic studies, and the recommendations that are being made by our Public Works Director, Robert Ravadia.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. As you indicated, over the last several years, there have been a variety of traffic and safety-related studies conducted for the town. Those are enumerated in your staff report, including evaluations of Alameda de las Pulgas, El Camino and Selby, neighborhood traffic management, local roadway safety plan, and others. Each of the studies include recommendations for improvement, and we're coming to you just to confirm where your priorities are as we look ahead to continuing implementation of current projects and looking for future capital projects to get a sense of where we should prioritize our efforts. And so in your report, you have a summary of projects and priorities that have been adopted by the council through various actions, including the adoption of the capital improvement program. And so we have some recommendations to kind of help streamline your discussion and conversation. And so those recommendations include completing ongoing projects that we have, such as the Alameda de las Pulgas Corridor Traffic and Safety Improvements Project, which we are currently under design, as well as the El Camino Real Complete Streets Gap Closure Study, which is currently in its second phase of public outreach. You received a presentation on that, I believe, in November or December, where we got your feedback on alternatives to reach out to the public. You recently approved the contract with Alta Planning and Design for the update of the town bicycle and pedestrian master plan. And so we have that going, moving forward to getting that firm under contract. And then there were a couple of projects that were deferred pending the outcome of that study, including the Selby Lane Bike Lanes project, as well as what the facilities on Atherton Avenue look like. We have recommendations in the Neighborhood Traffic Management Action Plan that include the installation of speed humps, striping modifications, turn restrictions, and other traffic control measures that the council has adopted, as well as looking at the intersection of Station Lane and Watkins for pedestrian crossing enhancements. We've reached out and had some conversations with traffic engineers, as well as we've gotten feedback from the California Public Utilities Commission when we were working on the quad gates, and the Public Utilities Commission, who oversees everything in the vicinity of the rail corridor, is opposed to putting a crosswalk right there at the intersection. And so
Of Watkins and
of Watkins
Diegelspiel.
and Station Lane.
Station Lane.
And so
That was Diegelspiel. Sorry.
so this is as you walk out
Station
here,
Lane.
go down Station Lane, Watkins. So as we were doing the design work, we did have a conversation with the Public Utilities Commission. And they
Too keen
were
about it?
really opposed to putting in a crosswalk. And so what the recommendation is as we look at the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, maybe there's a way to shift it further away from the intersection, but it's less convenient for folks that are leaving out from here. We can't put rapid flashing beacons or a stop sign in the direct vicinity of the rail crossing.
But the problem is that you can't see.
Yeah. and
Over the
so-
hump.
So
One of the options would be to move a crossing further up towards El Camino, away from the tracks to give better visibility, but the concern would be how far are people willing to travel out of their way when they're going to the park?
yeah,
Right,
because
If you're coming this, oh, go ahead.
the sidewalks are on the other side. So you have to cross anyway
Yeah.
to get to the sidewalk, else you're walking on
Yes.
nowhere or walking right next to the tracks.
What
Yeah,
was-
and so it's not a very
It's not a very easy thing.
conducive to children who live over here, especially children going out. But even if you're in a car, you cannot see. It's a problem.
It's been that way for a number of years, Bill.
So
Oh,
But
Just,
can you just say, why this went before the CPUC?
yeah, so everything in the vicinity of rail needs to get approval through the CPUC. And so as we were doing our diagnostic evaluation for the quad gates, and we're talking about that pedestrian crossing, we had that conversation with them. Further, we had additional conversations with a couple other traffic engineers that just took a general look at it. And they said that you can't really do
There's a
anything right in the vicinity. And the
Because
recommendation
it's too
is
close to the
Oh.
railroad?
because it's too close to the railroad.
But didn't we have a crosswalk at Fair Oaks?
The crosswalk at Fair Oaks is pulled back, I think, a bit from the crossing.
This side?
And so
Back on
just
this side.
illustrative, we did ask the CPUC about putting a stop sign on the westbound approach, and they said no.
But, I
So-
mean, we could still potentially evaluate, I think.
Yeah,
it's
I
Quad
think-
Gate Crossing, so there are pedestrian arms on both sides.
Right,
Yeah,
there are.
right. It goes down to the quad gate.
There's no pedestrian access on the one side.
On
On
one
the
side.
north side,
On the north
only
side.
on the south side.
So the recommendation that for this item, we have the bicycle and pedestrian master plan that we are evaluating. One of the items that we're going to ask them to look at is the pedestrian access from El Camino to Station Lane. As part of that, hopefully we can get some feedback on.
Just walk me through just really quickly. So we're here in the library, walk out Station Lane up to Watkins.
And so.
And so what you'd have to do is take a right and go down a ways and then a crosswalk over and then come back up. where that-
That's a potential. So
Okay.
right now, people can walk across. There's a curb opening on the other side. It is not marked. And as Councilmember Whitmer said, the grades at that crossing are challenging for visibility. And that's whether you're in a car or as a pedestrian. And so as that evaluation happens, there's going to be some consideration of, well, how far to the right is reasonable to ask people to walk before they cross.
Safe.
Well, you need to understand, it's going to be kids.
No,
It's
I
not going to
understand.
be very far that they're willing to go.
Well, kids on bikes or on
So-
e-bikes or something like that, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those are things that we intend to look at. Then upcoming items include, as we complete our gap closure study on El Camino,
So the next two bullets.
so this is that next two set of bullets.
Uh-huh.
As we complete that study, that's just a planning study, we're hopefully going to get to a preferred alternative or two to kind of carry forward to the next step. And so we're going to have to look at funding for that next step. And so that is doing some preliminary engineering, environmental evaluation, et cetera, for whatever that preferred set of alternatives are. In addition to that, when we did our townwide study, there were recommendations with regards to the potential of traffic signals on Middlefield Road at Watkins and at Fair Oaks. As you are likely aware, it's really difficult if you're trying to make a left turn off of Watkins onto Middlefield Road. Pedestrian access is also a bit challenging at that intersection. And then there was also the recommendation here at Fair Oaks to look at signalization.
So would that also be part of,
No.
that's all Atherton?
That's all.
Yeah, so
Okay.
what we're talking about, Fair Oaks at Middlefield is Palmer on
Yeah.
the side. So this is a potential evaluation of what that is, not necessarily going to design, but if this is something that you are interested in, then we can get it for future capital programming. And then the last bullet item
So do
is.
you want input back on that? But I think that
Not right
that's,
now.
not right now.
I'll finish my
Okay.
presentation.
Got it.
You're
No
welcome to
problem. Good,
discuss
good, no
and
problem.
ask questions. And then the last item that we have there is the Caltrain as part of their electrification project. In their environmental, in their EIR, there are a couple of items that they are required as mitigation, which include signalization of El Camino at Watkins and signalization of Glenwood at Glenwood at Middlefield is really challenging considering the exit out of Lindenwood is a single lane. And so figuring out how that operates will be an interesting
And it can
challenge.
be-
Anything can be done. It's just a matter of how it's coordinated because if you're holding back traffic on the one side of the gate, they're going to be held back a bit and you're going to have to phase that exit separate from all the other operations.
Have no idea.
No, it
Over
should
the
be a
years,
one-way. It
you
should
know?
be a one-way. You know, we just need to talk to the Lindenwood people about how would they want it if it was one way, because it's easy for them to get out through Oak Grove or to go out Hawthorne or Heather to go out through James.
Oh, I say,
Oh, no, no, I
any
don't think so.
changes
I
in
think
that,
that it has to be staggered type of hold back. But
They have the sign that says hold back, but no one does. And then
Yes.
so there are two cars coming in.
It was a
And there's two
stoplight,
cars trying
but
to
if it
get
was
out.
if it was a signalized stoplight, people would hold back
So
at
I
the
say,
red light.
any changes in that area is going to
What's that?
require a significant amount of public outreach.
Wait.
All right. Okay.
And so, again, the council adopted the local roadway safety plan, which will help in future prioritization as we look at have our accidents and things. And again, we have our bicycle and pedestrian master plan study that is going to be kicked off soon. So with that, I'm available to answer questions, but more importantly, we're looking for feedback from you as to what you all think are priorities that we should be focusing our efforts on.
Based on what you just described.
Okay, well, we
Or-
have the
Okay.
studies were all presented to you and made available. There may be other priorities that you have that we might consider.
But if we look on Alameda, the analysis, those are all things that are in process. These are some accomplishments that are in process and
You've already given direction on.
we've already given direction.
Elizabeth, your mic is cutting in and out. I don't know if
I-
you need to be closer or maybe your mic, it all of a
Oh.
sudden.
I'm sorry. Okay. How
Better.
about, did you want to say something?
No, I just couldn't hear you very well,
Okay.
so.
All
keep
right. Okay.
Oh,
We'll give it to Councilmember Widmer for question, comment.
Comments. He says he would take comments. So I feel real strongly, because I brought it up before, on out Dinkelspiel all the way out. So we have to do something, and it's got to be convenient because the kids are going to just shoot across. So whatever we can do to improve that situation, I think is extremely important. I also believe that the Middlefield to Watkins and Middlefield to Fair Oaks are very important signalizations that need to happen. I don't feel as strongly. I feel that there are other solutions at the Glenwood and Middlefield because, as I mentioned to you, there's not strong support from the residents on a signal at that location. And where we have not had strong locations, then we don't do it. And so that should not be the example, say, well, we're going to prove it this way, that all the other ones are right because we're going to do it there. So, but I do believe that those other two locations, which you had listed, I'd like to see those get put into the budget and we move forward on them because I do think that those are important locations and do have problems and they do stack up traffic. So I'd like to really see that. And I think our neighborhood travel or transportation plans where we're putting down the speed bumps, we need to just continue that, get more speed bumps in and get those in place. And like, has been said at some of the meetings I've been at with transportation, you really should have 2 or even 3 depending on the size of the road. And I think that we should be working with, as I brought up before, Menlo Park on doing something on Laurel. If you looked at the Alta presentation, even though there was a discussion on is it a route to school or not, the guy on his back said Laurel Square, Encinal School, Laurel Schoolway. So it is a route to school. And I think we need to do something, but we need to have our partners in crime also
Thank
do
you.
that. Thank you very much.
Some of these can be taken to the Transportation Committee to flesh out a little bit.
Yeah,
And it's not a directive to our,
just giving my 2
Yeah.
cents. He asked
Okay.
for our 2 cents.
I understand, but your 2 cents seem to be directing him. So
Oh,
that's
he
not what we
wanted
do.
my ideas and he's
great.
writing them down.
Appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Um,
And thank you
Diana.
for the candy.
When you look at the traffic reports, the most accidents we've had are on Selby Lane and El Camino. There's been fatalities there. Remember the chart with all the accidents? It is there's been a article in the newspaper about how deadly that intersection is. And here we're spreading out all our priority of intersections and it doesn't appear here once. So I understand it's not under our jurisdiction to decide a light there, but it's troubling that it's not even in our priorities. So to me, that is a gaping hole that makes no sense. I'd like to see us address that. And if that's something that has to come back to the council to discuss.
You did mention Selby Lane, and so on page 28 of 29, El Camino, there is a summary about,
As well.
say again,
On page 26 of 29, it's
26 and 20,
and Selby Lane traffic analysis.
yes.
If I may.
Yes,
Mayor?
would you like to talk about that?
Yeah, so
Sorry.
there are, you say, we're aware of the intersection. There was a study that was done a few years back in terms of reconfiguration of the intersection. Reconsideration of what that intersection is going to look like is part of the El Camino planning study. In addition to that, there was a recommendation in traffic management action plan with regards to potentially restriction left turns from Selby to El Camino. That's something that is in that plan. But before we enact that left turn, I think left turn restriction, we're going to have to do some significant outreach.
But
So-
I guess, I'm sorry, let me just follow up on that.
course.
The problem I have as if you're setting your priorities, it doesn't bubble up as a priority. And since I've been here, it's been bumped off to the El Camino argument. But at some point, we have to say that is a dangerous intersection and we need to address it. So if you're setting out any document that says what our priority is, I think it should be. So not only is it safety, if you look at your ranking of the Fs or Es and all that, it's ranked very poorly there. And it came up again when we just went for Oakwood, when we put Oakwood in our housing ordinance. And that came up again, that there's going to have to be a light there if anything gets built in part of our housing element on that property. So the fact that it's not called out is our single most important one in priorities. We're talking about the priorities. To me, that would be a priority and it bothers me it's not here.
So when I look at our intersections, I think that the Selby Lane intersection is probably the most dangerous intersection in the town. I think that the intersection at Watkinson Station Lane is a problem. And I'd put it close to the top of the list. It isn't the level of danger that Selby Lane is, but it's a problem. And as soon as some kid gets killed there, it's going to be at the level of Selby Lane. And I don't know that that will happen, and I'm not predicting that, but I think it's a problem. I think the other two intersections that are the highest level of problem for me are El Camino and Alejandra, and where I think there's a lot of backups and we have absolutely no solution about what to do with that intersection, and residents have totally different opinions about how to deal with that intersection. And I understand it'll be addressed in the El Camino Real Complete Street Study, but I'm just pointing out, I think that's a problematic intersection. And for me, the fourth problematic intersection is Watkins and Middlefield, where there are a lot of cars that get backed up there and people get very frustrated. I personally, of all these intersections, the one I drive the most is Marsh Road and Fair Oaks. And I don't find it a problem. I mean, yes, you have to be patient because you got to sit behind one or two cars in either direction. But it works through. Watkins doesn't work through. Watkins can be 2 or 3 times as long a wait as the intersection at Fair Oaks and Middlefield. I think that, and I didn't address El Camino and Watkins because I know that's supposed to be addressed by the Caltrain electrification mitigation effort, which we'll see if that ever happens. So that's my comments.
Any other, Stacy, Vice Mayor?
Yeah. I agree with the intersection on Dinglesfield being something that we should look at. I would like to, I don't know if this is maybe just me flagging that we should talk about this as part of our CIP budget discussion, but I think we need to take kind of a holistic view of Maple, Walnut, Ashfield, and kind of the whole town center adjacent neighborhood there. They came in front of the transportation committee in December through the like neighborhood traffic management, whatever, you could fill out some form, and they've requested, the residents of Maple Avenue have requested speed bumps on their street because they're seeing a change in parking and traffic patterns based on the popularity of our library. And the people on Walnut had indicated that they might also do the same thing. And I feel like we're playing kind of like a whack-a-mole game of one street at a time, and maybe we should be taking a more holistic look of that very specific neighborhood of how the traffic flows and parking impact of our library and our town center. And we're gonna have a new playground at the park. So I just think there's a lot of change happening that's affecting those neighborhoods. And I would love to get somebody to look at that from a, like, maybe we're switching streets to be one way or restricting parking in some way, or I have no idea because I am not a traffic expert, but I think we have done something that is affecting that neighborhood, and I would love for us to investigate that further in some way. So that's one of my
Thank you.
feedbacks. My other one I have a question about, just from the flow of in the on page 25 of 29, we talk about Valparaiso and the traffic on Elena and Emily and the possibility of changing those to one-way streets and needing to talk to Menlo Park. And I just wanted to understand, have we actually talked to them? Have we actually looked at it? Is this a real problem? I mean, those get very busy. I'm just wondering if we're not doing it because it's difficult, or can you just give more context on that one?
Yes, I'll try and give some context. So during morning commute, there's a lot of folks that are making left turns and right turns from Valparaiso for school drop-offs. And so in an ideal world, the road would be wide enough to provide a left turn pocket so that the cars can stack up out of the regular flow of traffic, in consideration that there's a lane in each direction. When cars are waiting to make those turns, they do back up traffic. And so when the town did the town-wide traffic study, there was an acknowledgement of the problem and conceptualizing what solutions may be possible. And so in the ideal world, it was try and widen the road, which isn't very easy. The second would be perhaps changing the traffic pattern on our streets so that you have one street being one way and the other street being the other way. I don't believe that the feedback from the public was very positive on that. And so there were a lot of concerns of what the impact of turning those into one-way streets would be. And that would range from increasing traffic on each street in a particular direction, as well as education and difficulty in accessing properties when you turn a street into a street. So you are then going to be, for example, forcing folks to circumnavigate either the schools or drive down El Camino to come up Valparaiso and drive around. So it adds quite a bit of impact to those residents just to get home.
Yeah. And
So I have a comment about that.
From somebody that lives down the street.
Yeah.
I personally do not feel that the schools are doing enough to mitigate their drop-off traffic. It has gotten worse over the years. It has not gotten better. Every now and then, when we as a town bring them here and hold their feet to the fire, then a little bit gets done. They increase the awareness to their student population, their parent population, to try to carpool more or, to mitigate that. Because literally it is gridlock. It's gridlock on Valparaiso, can't get out Valparaiso, and it's gridlock coming from Valparaiso at the junction of Emily, down Emily, to Park, to the whole, that whole block is just a gridlock. So, and then trying to go out Alejandra, swing by and go Emily to Alejandra to El Camino, that gets backed up to my house, to the corner of Emily and Alejandra from El Camino, because you can't get out. People are getting out of their cars and pushing the Hawk Beacon, to be able to get onto El Camino. So something has to be done. And I think the schools are a big part of it, and partnering with us more. Just the sheer amount of traffic has increased. Yes.
Yeah,
So-
I see back up there a lot. I was surprised to see this idea in this document. Just curious.
Councilmember,
So just a different comment. And I don't want to interrupt that if you
No, go
wanted to
ahead.
comment on that.
no,
I
I'm
did. I had a
fine.
different one too.
An intersection that we've talked about in the more distant past and really haven't addressed recently is Atherton Avenue and El Camino. And we may address that in the complete street study. But there's a lot of problems with that
It's
intersection, right?
huge.
The streetlights, the crosswalks are terrible, terrible. There's no crosswalk across Fair Oaks. So you see people walk in the street and sometimes with a stroller, that's a real problematic intersection, I think. It's not as unsafe as Selby Lane in El Camino because you don't have, because the light manages people turning left and you don't have the same problem you have at Selby Lane and El Camino. But I think it's a real serious problematic intersection that could be fixed, but it takes some engineering, attention that and one solution that we have talked about,
Striping with
well,
paint on
the
the,
whole intersection needs work.
Stand, but-
Striping, new crosswalk across Fair Oaks. It's shocking we don't have that. And that whole intersection on the east, on the northeast side, right, which is this side of El Camino, on the northern intersection, it's just, what do? If you end up on that corner, you really don't know what to do. You got to walk in the street without a crosswalk is what you have to do. So one solution that we've talked about at that intersection that I'd like us to look at again is coming east on Atherton Avenue, which I'm sure many of us do, some of us many times a day. If there's only one car on the left, you can get into the right lane and turn right. But if there's two cars in the left, you can kind of go up on the curb and turn right. And you can see there's a big hole there because people do it. But if there's three cars on the left, there's no way you can turn right. And if we could take some of the shoulder, which we may need to take a little piece of the corner of the fence off, we could end up creating a right turn lane there that would really benefit people because that intersection gets backed up all the way to the turn during rush hour. And I'd like us to revisit that. I mean, this is an intersection Stacy knows a lot about. So
it bogs her
Else, yeah.
road exit in egress. Okay. All right, Councilwoman.
I have another thing that I would add to this, which is a little slightly different, but I think it should, if we're talking about our priorities for traffic, and I brought it up last time, is modeling software. And I think that'll revolutionize this whole conversation. And it also allows us to revisit, because as our city goes to change quicker with the addition of new buildings, it changes the pattern. We saw this on Selby Lane where the nature of the school changed. We're functioning on information from the past. And so we need to be able to model stuff with the changes happening faster than every 10 years. So I would put in a list of priorities, getting modeling software and teaching us how to use it and put it into our policymaking.
George,
Thanks.
City Manager.
Thank you,
Hi.
Madam Mayor. One thing, as you're thinking about all of these things, and Robert can probably articulate it far better than me, but when you're talking about crosswalks and pedestrian walks, we have, before we put paint on the ground, we need to make sure that there is a improved ADA compliant accessible path of travel on both sides of that crosswalk.
Agree.
So when we're talking about Atherton Avenue or anywhere along El Camino, if there is no sidewalk and there is no pedestrian walkway, it becomes a little more of a challenge. Second is, I thought we had spoken to that neighbor, Rick, at that intersection. Do you remember speaking to that
Yeah,
neighbor?
but it was 7
Changed.
or 8 years ago and that property's changed
It
ownership.
changed, yeah.
Okay. Okay.
At 1 Odell, you're talking 1.
Yeah.
Yeah, right there at the corner.
Right.
And then lastly, Selby and ECR, the longer term members of the council will remember when Caltrans came to the council on multiple occasions and talked about, the warrants for that intersection, recommended signalization. It's actually talked about in the staff report. And we had neighborhood meetings, and the neighborhood is not supportive of the traffic signal at that intersection. So putting it in would require the council to vote
Override that
override that.
and work with the county,
Yeah,
Redwood City,
And the state.
and the state.
the state,
Yeah.
right? There's like 4 jurisdictions
Yeah.
to kind of have to come together.
So just an awareness of
So
that.
there were other ideas that were brought up at that time with, it's not a signal, but it was to manage the flow of
Mhm.
traffic with berms and, well, other little islands and things,
I
right?
say, if the council recalls, we actually applied for a grant to fund that. Unsuccessful. But it is something that we are aware of, and it's not something, as we're looking at doing improvements on, that's one of the key areas that
So-
is of importance.
Excuse me, I just want to look quickly. What I've noticed is traffic coming from Redwood City, right? As they come into Atherton and they pass that last stoplight, they see 3 lanes of free, travel. They just gun it. So the traffic coming from Redwood City down El Camino past Selby they're going very fast. They're going way more than the 35 miles an hour. They're going 40, 50 miles an hour. And then that makes it harder for the Selby trying to merge in or to turn a left or whatever. So if use our lanes.
Well, that's a conversation for the El Camino study that is
Okay,
ongoing.
I'm just,
Yeah.
yeah.
Can
Well,
I
thought
just
that
make
they
a
had
couple
agreed
comments
to
on
no
that?
Okay,
left
just a
turn.
second. All right.
Thought that they had
Councilmember
looked at no
Hawkins,
left turn.
Manuelian, you have the floor.
I think that some of the problems with Selby Lane, and I guess I'm reiterating the same thing, is that we can't punt it off to the farther. We need to be lobbying it now. And second, on the neighborhood input, I live in that neighborhood and I never was part of that. And I'll tell you, when you turn left, there's multiple problems. So if you're coming down Selby and you're trying to turn toward Redwood City, first of all, like she said, there's 3 lanes of people driving way too fast. So now you got to turn left. And normally you jut out really fast and there's not enough lane. Like some of our left-hand turns have a little part so you kind of pull in and then wait. The whatever you call that is too short.
The little
There's
eyebrow or
barely enough for a car. I mean, if you were a perfect driver, but there's barely enough. So there's other solutions in terms of at minimum making that longer. But I guess having lived in that and having raised two kids that are now 30, when they learn to drive, we insisted that, and what the neighborhood does is you go to the light in Redwood City. So you don't turn left there, you go through the neighborhood
Yeah.
and you turn at the light. So this has been an ongoing problem and you know what I mean? There's got
Diana,
to be
I do that
solutions.
right now anyway. Alejandra, I'll take a right and I'll go down to the little stoplight at Encinal. I'll make a U-turn and come up.
Well, maybe that's what we need to do. And we did talk about the ideas that maybe you can't turn left there. Maybe you make a right hand only, there's
You
solutions,
kind
but
of
it
have to go
keeps
all the
getting
way over,
punted.
you have to go over 3 lanes of
Right.
traffic, to get to your turning spot. Okay.
But let me just finish what I was going to say. So every time we bring this up, there's 2 stop points. One is, it's going to be addressed by the El Caminos, which is, when is that going to be built? Number 1. And number 2 is that the residents didn't agree with it. And I'll say, I live there and I never got the outreach. And I would think, 2, we should do outreach again. Number 3, at what point do we as a council say, if that's our most dangerous intersection, we have data on it. If there's somebody who doesn't want the light there, maybe the data of the safety of the whole community has to override what 1 or 2 people may feel differently about.
Right. Okay, I would like to wrap this up. This has really been a great
Well, I'd like to
discussion.
make a comment if I could.
Excuse
Mayor.
me, Mr. Whitney.
Yeah,
You have one more comment?
yes, I do.
Okay.
So when we did talk about this, the residents were open to a no left turn. But I will also add, I know a lot of the residents who were there at that time, and many of them have passed on. Okay, so there's probably there might be a new feeling if we were to poll those people because either they passed on or they're really
over.
on in age or they've moved.
They just
So-
realize how dangerous it is.
Well, I
And so
think
their
people like-
fears of,
yeah.
increasing traffic down that road may be allayed.
Possibly.
Okay. Do you have enough input?
Well, we have the feedback, we have the existing priorities. So
Yes.
what we'll do as part of the CIP process is try and integrate some of those other priorities identified by the council, kind of prioritize them based on this feedback. But there's also staff load and ability to manage
Of
those
course.
projects moving
Yeah, I
forward.
mean,
So
we
we'll
threw
try
a
and-
lot at you.
We'll try and do that as well.
Okay,
As part of the CIP process.
Thank you.
very much. Okay. Nothing else? I'm going to call this meeting adjourned.
Thank you.